If you want to start your dental practice from scratch, but you're struggling to get started because you don't know where to begin, this video is for you. My goal with this video is to clarify and help you understand the major steps involved in starting a dental practice from scratch. From all the blog posts I've written so far on Dental Startup Academy, a lot of you have sent me emails on a weekly basis asking me, where do I start? What should I do first? Should I be talking to the bank first, or should I decide on a location and have the lease document signed first? When should I be talking to an accountant or an attorney? Although there are things that have to be done first, there's not an exact sequence in which things are going to happen. Some of the things are going to happen at the same time in parallel. But the goal is to give you a bigger picture of what's involved, the things you'll need to have in place, the team that you need to have in place to help you get to the point of opening the doors to your own practice, and also give you an idea of the timeline, how things should be moving along. I won't go over all the steps in detail because that's not the point of this video, and this will make this video like 10 hours. But as I'm going along, I will link to detailed articles that I've written on each of those topics so you can reference them as you're going along your startup journey. So where do you start? Before you get overwhelmed with all the different steps involved in starting a dental office from scratch, there are a few things you need to consider. Now, before I got started with my own practice, I was an associate between 2 different offices, and at one point, I was associating between 3 different offices, making minimum loan payments towards my student loan balance, paying the bills, and spending the rest on travel and leisure, living the life that I craved as a dental student. However, I realized that I was too comfortable, I was trading time for money, and no matter how hard I worked, there's going to be a cap on how much I actually take home, which wasn't really going to make much of a dent on my student loan balance, which at that point in my life was a priority, and which may be the case for many of you listening who may have just recently graduated or who are contemplating starting your dental practice and who have a large student loan balance. But I made up my mind to go out on my own, to practice dentistry my way, and to support the lifestyle that I wanted to create for myself. Which brings me to an important point. I want to emphasize lifestyle here. Whatever business you're in, do it in a way that supports your lifestyle. But what is your lifestyle? This is a question you need to answer for yourself to decide what kind of dream office you'd like to work in that's going to ultimately support your lifestyle. When starting a new business, we sometimes tend to not think too far out. You can't just think 2-3 years out, but you may need to think about where do you see yourself practicing and how do you see yourself practicing in your own office 5, 10, or 15 years from now. So start by answering the following 2 questions and write down the answers somewhere. First, where do you see yourself living and working? The initial investment into a dental practice is not small, especially if you've got other liabilities like your student loan balance. So think of a place you wouldn't mind going to for work. You may also want to think about your commute. How far do you want your commute to be from where you live? If you're an associate at another practice and you're thinking about opening a dental practice, don't forget about your restrictive covenant, which is a clause that's in the agreement or the contract you signed when you started to work for the practice. That clause is going to restrict you from opening a practice within a certain number of mile radius from that location. The second question you need to answer is, what kind of practice do you want and how big? Do you want an office where you see multiple associates and specialists working together in a group practice setting? This is important because it's going to help you decide how big of an office in terms of operatories you need. Is it 3 ops? Is it 5 or 7? Depending on what you decide, it's going to help you determine the approximate square footage of space you need to get started. But for now, I would say start with either 300 to 400 square foot of space for each operatory that you're thinking about. For instance, if you plan on having 7 operatories, let's say, you want to start looking for space that is about 2,100 to 2,800 square foot of space. Remember, these numbers are not set in stone. Some of you may want larger open space for each operatory, for restrooms or waiting area, whatever it may be. On the contrary, some of you may decide to go even smaller. All depends on how you want to practice. So after you've done some thinking on what kind of setting you want for yourself in your own practice, now it's time to take some concrete steps to turn your vision into reality. So the first thing you're going to need to do is get financing. So start by talking to banks first. You need to get an idea of what you can get pre-approved for. Okay, for instance, if the bank is only going to lend you $300,000 and you've got maybe, let's say you're going to put in of your own money or $50,000, so a total of $350,000 of budget, you can't go out looking for an office space that's 7,000 square foot. Okay, it just doesn't make sense. So knowing how much you can spend total on your office, it's going to help you filter out all the spaces you shouldn't be looking at. You don't need to be looking at space that's 5,000 square foot or 7,000 square foot because it doesn't fit your budget. If you don't need a loan for the construction and the start of your own practice, more power to you. That's amazing. But for the majority of you, I'm assuming that you're going to go apply for financing. So you should start talking to banks first for your dental practice startup loan. So I would start talking to some of the big banks first, like Bank of America Practice Solutions, Live Oak, Wells Fargo, etc. These banks have tons of experience working with dentists, and they know exactly what it takes to get an office started from scratch. You can also start talking to local smaller banks and credit unions, but get ready to fill out some serious paperwork, like a business plan, revenue projection, questions, estimated costs, etc. Once you have an idea of what you can get pre-approved for, you'll be able to form a budget, like I said earlier, and you'll know exactly how much you can spend on your office before you even open the doors to seeing your first patient. Some banks are going to ask for a dental startup practice business plan. I never did one of these because I ended up going with Bank of America, who did not require one. But the business plan is going to ask for things like projected revenue for the first 1 to 3 years, marketing strategies, growth strategies, the estimated cost of capital required to start the office from scratch, market demographics, etc. Don't pull out your hair just yet. They're not looking for exact numbers. Do your best to figure out estimates. But this is a good exercise for you to start thinking about, even if the banks didn't require a business plan. Now, next, as you're talking to the banks, you're going to need to have a legal business entity for your dental practice. So you're going to need to talk to an attorney or a CPA to form an LLC or a C Corp or an S Corp. You need this registration to get a tax ID, which is what you're going to need to sign off on that business bank loan and all the other stuff that's going to come along. All right, let's go over to the next step, which is determining a location for your dental startup practice. Deciding on a location for your startup practice, it's super critical, so do not rush this step. To help you narrow down your location, you should have already answered the 2 questions we brought up earlier. One was, where do you see yourself living and working? And second was, how big of an office you need. The answer to the first question is going to help you narrow down the area, and the answer to the second question is going to help you determine how big of a space you'll need. Some factors to consider when you're deciding on a location for your dental startup practice is things like space availability, visibility. Is the office visible from a road that has ongoing traffic, or is it hidden inside an office building? Zoning, parking, co-tenants. Is the space that you found part of a big plaza that has a big anchor tenant like Costco that's going to drive tons of traffic to that area? I go over all of these in detail in this post, 7 factors to consider on deciding on a location for your dental office. Make sure to reference this blog post when you get to this point of looking for space. You're also going to need to look at something you've probably already heard of, is the dentist to population ratio when determining location for your startup practice. But also remember that this ratio isn't everything when deciding on a location. I've got a detailed post that covers the resources that you can utilize to figure out this dentist to population ratio around your prospective location. You'll also be able to download an Excel sheet where you can do a 135 mile radius study for your prospective location. So make sure to check the link below this video. All right, let's move on. Once you've narrowed down your options to about 2 to 3 spaces, you're gonna need to start negotiating the lease for your dental office space. But why would you negotiate on multiple spaces? Because if negotiation on one of the spaces falls through, which can sometimes take not only a couple of weeks, but sometimes a couple of months, you'll have wasted lots of time. So if possible, start the negotiation process on more than one property. Speaking of lease negotiations for your dental startup practice, you do not want to do this yourself. You do want to work with a lease attorney or a lease expert. When I was starting out, I did end up hiring a lease expert who came as a referral because he had tons of experience working with dentists. I'll be honest, it was expensive, but the initial investment was well worth the time, especially because I've been in that lease space for about 10 plus years now. But if I were to go through this process again, or let's say starting from scratch again, or negotiating space on an existing office space, I probably wouldn't hire an expert because I know what I'm looking for. But if it was my first time, I would definitely work with a lease expert because when I was starting out, I had no idea what I was looking at. Again, to see all the information involved with all things involved in lease negotiations, I actually wrote 2 different articles on this topic. So make sure to reference those when you're going through this phase of your startup journey. Let's talk about contractors. For the design and construction of your dental practice, you're going to need a team. One is a contractor. Whether you go with a dental specific or a general contractor will completely depend on your risk tolerance. You're going to need an architect. Architect is the person who's going to do the initial office drawings for your office design. And architect is also the person who's going to give you the official stamped blueprints that you're going to need to hand over to your local building department to get a building permit. If you decide to go with the larger dental companies like Henry Schein, Patterson, they pretty much do it all. Like they provide equipment, design, and the construction of the full office. But of course, you've got to do your own research. When selecting a contractor, there are things you're going to need to consider before you sign on the dotted line on that agreement between you and the contractor. You'll have to figure out what questions you want to ask your potential contractors when you're interviewing them. There are also things you need to watch out for within the actual agreement for the construction of your dental practice. Also, I've covered this in detail in a separate blog post that I wrote on the dental office contractor, how to choose the right one, and how to review your contract. Make sure you reference this post as you're going through this phase of your startup journey. In the beginning of this video, I asked you to answer the question, what kind of practice office you want and how big? Well, if you don't have an answer for this, it'll be difficult to brainstorm and think about initial design or the drawings of the floor plan of your practice. Once you receive your initial drawings from the architect and or the contracting company, you'll need to know how to review this floor plan so you can go back and forth and actually ask for revisions. I've also talked about this in a detailed post that I wrote on dental office design floor plan, how to review and revise. So please review this article so you know what you need to be looking for as you are reviewing your floor plan. Let's talk about dental office equipment list. Ordering supplies and instruments for your startup practice, it's a time-consuming and a tedious process, but it's a critical step in your startup journey. When you're starting out, you're gonna wanna have enough just to get started. You definitely don't want stuff sitting on the shelves in your drawers. Remember, cash flow is king, especially when you're starting out. As dentists, we're all comfortable with using different things when it comes to products and brands, but I always believe in using something that works best in my own hands. So you should stick to using something that works for you. To stay organized during this step of your startup journey, you should have a list or a template like on an Excel sheet where you can write things down and you can check things off as you order. But the first step is to break things down into categories like restorative, preventive, crown and bridge, endo, oral surgery, lab supply, etc. To help you with this step, I've linked below this video to the post Dental Office Equipment List, where to get started for your startup, where you'll be able to download an Excel file, which has a list of all supplies and equipment that I started with. Let's move on to the IT and technology setup for your practice. How you have your IT setup in your practice is going to have a significant impact on efficiency and patient flow throughout your practice. That's why it's so important to have a vision of exactly what you're trying to achieve in your practice. When I mention IT, I mean everything from the type of phone system you're gonna set up in your practice, to the kind of server you're gonna have, to the computers you're gonna use, to the practice management system you're gonna utilize, as well as the software that you're gonna utilize to send claims to the insurance companies, etc. And to help you get started, make sure to review my post on IT setup in your practice, where I talk about things that I use in my own practice, as well as all the other things you're gonna need to think about ordering. All right, let's talk about the insurance stuff. You need to start thinking about the credentialing process with the insurance companies, especially if you decide to accept insurance in your practice. When you're about 3 or so months away from opening the doors to your first set of patients, this is when you need to start thinking about credentialing process with the insurance companies. Usually for most plans, the credentialing process can take anywhere from 45 to 90 days. It could take longer, so just make sure you give yourself enough time to be enrolled in these plans before you open the doors to your practice. And the way you start the credentialing process is by contacting the provider relations department in each of the companies you plan to enroll in. So what you do is you just start calling up these plans and request their application packet. I do want to mention something that I didn't do when I first started, but if I were to start today, I would go this route. And that is working with a third-party company that actually specializes with this whole credentialing process, as well as the fee negotiations on your behalf. The fee that you pay to these companies to negotiate your insurance fees for you is well worth the investment, considering the number of years you're going to be in practice. Let's talk about everyone's favorite, marketing. How do you bring patients through the door to your practice? You need to have an approximate date of opening so you can kind of plan your marketing timeline. For your scratch startup, the goal is to have patients the first day you're open. So the marketing of your practice starts well before you open. The first step in marketing is the location of your practice. So while your office is being built, put the biggest banner up. You're gonna need to get permission to put a banner up like this. Put the biggest sign that says coming soon, and make sure the banner has something along the lines of dentist or dental in it, and make sure it's big and visible. This is especially true if your office is visible from the ongoing traffic by a road. You're also gonna wanna start a direct mail campaign, probably about a month or so before opening the doors to your practice. And this should bring awareness of your new practice to the community. Don't expect to drive patients right away. How I marketed my practice back in 2013 when I started is going to slightly differ how you market your practice today. If I was starting today from scratch, I would go all in on social media, specifically digital marketing of my practice. Start a Facebook page of your practice once you determine the name of your practice from the day you sign the office lease. Share the entire process of the construction, the design, etc. with your audience. Go live. Then you can boost these videos and posts through paid ads. And if you can, do the same through YouTube. Marketing is a topic we can talk about all day, but I won't get into the detail for this video. Instead, I'm going to link to 2 detailed posts I've written on marketing for startups. Okay, so we've covered quite a bit, but those are the essential steps, sort of a big picture in what's involved in getting a practice off the ground. Going out on your own is an exciting venture. It's okay if you're a bit nervous. Once you open your own practice, you are an entrepreneur, and you have to become comfortable being challenged on a regular basis. Do not try to sprint. Set your mind up as if you're starting a marathon. keep moving ahead at a steady pace. If you need more information, the most important thing you can do is reference the articles and posts that I've linked below this video. I'll be bringing you more useful videos moving forward, so make sure you tune in and subscribe. And if you found this video helpful, make sure to share it with your friends and colleagues. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care.